Marcy. Hi, Tracy. Thank goodness. Did it let you guys write in?
It did.
Okay. So let's see. I don't want to record now. Stop recording. Okay. Hi, Corinne.
Hey, Phyllis.
Thanks again, sweetie. So tell me, like I just hit that. Oh, don't you look beautiful? You cleaned up pretty good, girlfriend.
I mean, you know, showers are pretty amazing.
You gotta love when that happens. So I went to share screen.
Yes.
And I hit multiple participants can share simultaneously. Is that what I want, right? Like, how do I, like,
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I am the co-host. Okay, I just wanted to check. Do you want people to be able to share their screen or just be able to?
I just thought you, so I don't need to.
Yeah, I'm a co-host, so you don't have to do anything. So whenever you're ready to go, I'll just share my screen that has your presentation up.
Okay, brilliant.
And then you can just tell me click or, you know, go ahead or however you want to let me know that you're ready to advance.
And I was thrilled it was you, Corinne, because I'm thinking like I'm gonna, refer to you too in terms of the licensed trainer.
Well, and that's what I said when Michelle sent a thing out and said, you know, would people mind signing up? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, so I had Christina's one later on data equity, mostly because I really want to hear it also. And I was like, well, I'll hop in with Phyllis because, you know, we're going to be doing this together here. It's on our calendar, like already next month. And I guess we're going to be doing it virtually. So
I get, unless, I don't know, if a smaller number of people show up.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's still like, so yeah, we'll have to talk about it for sure.
Well, and I guess it's all going to also depend on what happens with schools. Like,
oh yeah,
you know, we'll have to see.
Yeah. So thinking we'll circle up with Laura and, kind of start talking about what the scenarios might be. I did put those flyers in the slide deck. Thank you so much. Yep. I'm so grateful. So thanks for joining, friends. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. Corinne's going to, the tech piece of all of this still is very anxiety producing for me. So Corinne has offered to co-pilot there. So she's gonna put up the Google slide deck. Thank you for being here. Brilliant. Love it when a plan comes together. Thanks, Corinne.
Anything for you.
Oh, heart you right back. We'll just wait one more minute or so. We've got a dozen of us here. You have joined Restorative Practices and looking how that supports a PBIS framework. So hopefully that's what you're wanting to hear about. If not, please feel free to come and go as you want. What do you think, Corinne? Should we get this party started?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. So I'm Corinne's co-hosting with me. I'm so happy you've chosen to join us this next hour. I want to thank you for being here. My name is Phyllis Brown. I'm a staff developer and the positivity strategist here at the Lincoln Intermediate Unit. I focus my time, talent, energy, and passion around culture and climate building. I'm presently certified as a PBIS and an appreciative inquiry facilitator, as well as an appreciative leadership coach. And Corinne and I are now licensed restorative practices trainers. Firecracker that, Corinne. How about it?
Woo woo.
Thank you so much. So utilizing my servant heart, I am committed to supporting administrators, individuals, teams, classrooms, schools, and districts to bring out the best in themselves and the best in each other. I believe the Lord laid it on my heart decades ago to be a positive agent of change. So I'm feeling so blessed to have the opportunity to be together raising the praise for restorative practices. Thanks, Corinne. So we do have our meeting norms. Tanya did a great job this morning of kind of reviewing all of those. Just a reminder, the microphones are disabled, but since there's we're up to 17 of us, I'm going to invite some folks to unmute and share. Please consider showing your video if you're okay with that, or if you're able in terms of your connectivity stability, and obviously the chat function is available if you have any questions. Down at the bottom there, I do love full participation, as some of my friends in the crowd certainly know. So down at the bottom where it says reactions, you have a thumbs up or a clap. So your engagement. Certainly miss being in a room with you. Many of you know I'd be working the room, and this is my virtual hug, which means friends. So I appreciate any energy that you have, that you could share it with us. So we're going to move on to, again, if this is something you're looking toward, your Act 48 credits, all of that is due by the 31st. Just a reminder there. We'll move on. So here's our possible positive outcomes. We really, excuse me, want to have our end in mind. We're going to review the basics of PBIS. We're going to do an overview of restorative practices, exploring how the restorative practices fits in the continuum in terms of integrating into the multi-tiered system of supports. And we're definitely going to hopefully have time if you have any questions about implementation inquiry. Thanks. So what are teachers telling us, excuse me, about challenging behaviors in school? So definitely disrespect, the non-compliance, simple disruptions, the most time consuming, and they are the frequent behaviors that teachers and administrators are facing, and that behavior is one of those most difficult issues to deal with on a daily basis. And new teachers are telling us that dealing with problem behaviors is the thing that they feel least prepared to be able to deal with. So thank you. Current trends, our littles are coming to school with skill deficits. Again, Dr. Lane could not be more on our bandwagon when it comes to social emotional learning. The rates of problem behavior, they do continue to increase. And, you know, again, this idea of getting tough on discipline. So we're going to invite you to start to look at things with a new mindset, new skill set. Thank you. So frightening, 88% students identified poor readers at 4th grade have the probability of remaining poor readers. Boy, that forever word. So students with a history of chronic and pervasive behavioral problems and associated academic deficits, they're more likely to go to jail than to graduate from high school. Sobering, my friends, absolutely sobering. Again, brings the equity issue in a huge way. Thank you. So just this little graphic from the PBIS.org, our challenge. Can't afford to save this one, but don't worry, someone will catch him. Yeah. We want to catch him. So consider this. Until we've defined, taught, modeled, practiced, reinforced, and retaught, discipline actually means to teach. It is unethical for adults to punish. Boy, if we could punish behavioral errors out of children, yeah, it just feels like an oxymoron for sure. Thanks, Corinne. So again, those likely results of the punitive practices, what are we going to see increases in? Aggression, vandalism, truancy, tardiness, and dropouts. So interestingly enough, I recently read an article where the data showed a direct correlation between the number of days a kindergarten student is absent and their likelihood of graduation. I mean, that's how early all of this starts. So what do we really need? This framework to anchor all of these school improvement initiatives. Dr. Lane spoke about the plate, right? So this common language, common logic, all fits in that MTSS framework, and certainly SWEBs, school-wide positive behavior support or positive behavior intervention supports, all are a framework for what needs to happen. When we know better, we can do better, my friends. So I have this brief video that I really like. So again, kind of what is PBIS? So Corinne, if we could just show that to everybody. Oh, can they hear it? I wonder what happened to the sound.
Sorry, I need to change the optimization so you guys can hear it. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you, Corinne.
Program in place to ensure that all students maximize learning in a safe and positive environment. The foundational belief of PBIS is that we can effectively teach appropriate behavior to all students. We do this by implementing best practices for behavior management with fidelity. Our best practices are instructive, not punitive, and responsive rather than reactive. As a staff, we've already provided explicit instruction about school-wide expectations when we reviewed the expected behaviors in different areas of campus the first week of school. We positively reinforce these behaviors by using Grizzly cards, the prize card, and school-wide recognition at our Grizzly Nation assemblies. When we implement such positive reward systems, we may have concerns about creating an environment in which students will only behave if there is an incentive attached. Daniel Pink, the author of Drive, goes into great detail on this topic, saying that if we want to encourage creativity and motivation, we move away from material rewards. Therefore, if we want our positive rewards to be most effective, we need to be specific about the behavior being reinforced. And remember that it's not really about the ticket, but the positive relationships we're building with our students. What happens, though, when the explicit instruction and positive rewards don't work? Then we refer to our flowchart for responding to problem behaviors. The flowchart outlines the best practices and processes for responding to both minor and major behaviors. In addition to using best practices, we want to document problem behavior using the office data referral form. This is different from the traditional referral in that it is not used as a punishment, behave or I'll give you a referral, but as a piece of data that will become part of the bank of data that will inform how we as a team will respond to patterns of behaviors. Responses to problem behavior will match student need. They'll be based on the function of behaviors and will be differentiated in nature and intensity. For example, our booster movies will be a Tier 1 response that will serve as a sufficient reminder for most students of what expected Grizzly behavior looks like. Students who need more intensive reteaching may be referred to our MTSS team and recommended for Tier 2 interventions like check-in, check-out. Things to note. 1. We don't change the students. We change how we respond to what they're doing. This doesn't happen by sending the students somewhere else. If we don't change the environment in our classroom, the same behaviors will continue to occur. If we keep doing what we've always done, we'll keep getting what we've always gotten. 2. How do we make effective changes in how we respond? We start paying attention to the function of students' behaviors. Are they seeking attention from peers or adults? Are they seeking material objects? Are they avoiding tasks or attention from peers or adults? These are vitally important questions as they will shape our responses. 3. How effective we become at identifying the function of behaviors will make all the difference in how we change our responses to behaviors. Our interventions will be most effective if they match the function of behavior. But what if I run out of ideas for effectively managing behavior? We are fortunate to have many colleagues on staff who specialize in behavioral interventions who will come running to help us, as well as an entire team to cheer us on as we continue to support our students in all areas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Corinne. Yes, if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got, my friends. So what is school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports? So no doubt these acronyms you've seen describe PBIS or SWEBS. So educators were so good that way of switching up our alphabet soup and kind of redesigning things, but the basics remain the same. So again, all of this is no doubt, again, through the years, this good work's been called many things. Thanks, Corinne. So we are looking at SWEBS. It's this framework for enhancing adoption and implementation of a continuum of evidence-based interventions to be able to achieve academic and behavioral important outcomes for all students. So there was a Gallup poll done this decade, and what it spoke to was that discipline is the second greatest challenge faced in public education, second to the lack of funding. It was reported it was one of the top 5 reasons teachers leave the profession is due to a lack of their ability to manage classroom behavior. Thank you. So we've seen the triangle quite a bit from Dr. Lane this morning, so it just kind of makes my heart smile. This is that visual triangle that's frequently used to examine fidelity and outcomes. Again, fidelity is looking at, are the adults in the system doing what it is they said they would do? And the outcomes are all about students. Are we meeting students where they are? Are we meeting their needs? Thanks. So looking at school climate, culture and climate, the goal is to build this healthy, more caring community of learners and leaders. Culture is our personality, climate's our behavior. How are we going to learn to behave our way to success? And just kind of look down through the, there we go. What is SWEBS? So if student success, oh, we'll go back to that one, Corinne, I'm sorry. If student success and achievement was completely guaranteed, looking at what SWEBS is, what questions would we be asking? This is proactive, preventative. So this is one of my, thanks, Corinne. This is one of my favorite, we'll go to the poetry here. So if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach, we punish. Again, questions are fateful acts. Why can't we finish the last sentences automatically as we do the others? Thanks, Corinne. So looking at, when you look at your system, and my guess is of the 23 of us who've joined together here for this hour, some have maybe pieces of PBIS, maybe you are fully implemented. Again, an effective approach starts with a healthy, robust tier 1. That's what we hear Kathleen speaking to as well. Or again, this foundation, this plate where we can continue to meet student needs. So I'd like to invite your participation to share in the chat, and Corinne is so sweet to be helping us support me with this. So could you put in there, what are some PBIS practices already in place at your school? What are some things that are already working? Maybe what's something that's impacted the most positive change? Beautiful. Acknowledgements. Yes. The shout outs. I love it. Thank you for your participation. The consistency, expectations. Beautiful. I love this student choice. Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, look. Oh, we're getting more, Corinne. Oh, the teamology, focusing on the positive, character presentations, beautiful. Wow, Brooke.
Cannot say enough about teacher buy-in on that one.
Isn't it joyous? Can I firecracker that, Corinne? I think we can do some Zoom firecracker in there. Beautiful. There's a sparkler for sure. Yeah, didn't find that graphic by accident. So thank you. So we'll move on to the next slide. Again, we are looking at, regardless of the location, the school community centers around the idea of membership. What does it mean to be a member of this community when this community is at its best or most ideal self? So I read a definition once, and it invites us to consider that community actually means where we're going to receive each other as a gift. So can you imagine living in that culture and climate? Again, we have mission, vision, values, goals. We have a solid common language. We are having this common experience together. Thank you, Corinne. So this is a PA essential practice to provide student-centered supports. And it is funded through TAC, our training and consultation here at the Lincoln Intermediate Unit. Christina McLaughlin and Jen Hagerman and I are the triumphant trio now with PBIS. There is no cost to public schools. So thank you. So this quote to me just kind of represents our segue into looking at restorative practices. Don't push growth, remove the factors limiting growth, right? So restorative practices, I do want to show you just a brief video. So whatever magic you did the last time, Corinne, if you can do your dance act again, we're going to listen to a video from IIRP.
When I was in Sullivan freshman year, there was lots and lots of fights. I couldn't learn anything because it was like basically students in class would just, disturb the peace.
I had this really rough class where there was a lot more disrespect that I faced, just in terms of kids feeling like they could talk to an adult however they wanted to. Like there wasn't really a different way for them to speak to the adults in the building.
The kid that we're looking at now is somebody who likely sees trauma on a daily basis, is full of anxiety 99% of the time.
In the past, what has happened is either the student gets suspended, or it's usually they'll talk to the dean of students and they'll come back, but they'll come back really upset.
I would say the offender or the situation with that student, I would just say, well, you know what? I'm gonna look at the student code of conduct, you're getting suspended. That's it.
I believe that when you suspend the student, the only thing you're telling them is go home and have free time. That's the only thing that you're doing. When it comes to their classwork, you're making them fall behind.
How is that really gonna justify the student's change mentally, socially? How is it going to change in that aspect?
The punishment is so harsh and there's no conversations that go along with them. We don't teach them that. We don't teach them to take responsibility on what happened. We don't help them to reflect upon what happened or what they've done.
So you'd be the first one in your family to get a high school diploma, first one to graduate from Sullivan. We're 0 for 2 with your family. I want to be 1 for 3. And you're this close. Graduation is May 3rd.
When you talk of restorative justice and reduction of suspension, the biggest misconception is that when kids make mistakes and we don't suspend, we're letting them off the hook. That's their whole life, has been wrong someone and then run from it, wrong someone and not talk about it. I would tend to think that we are actually making them more on the hook.
You're not supposed to reward them by giving them free time. You should help them out and say, you know what, we're gonna keep you in school so you won't be behind.
There's a time for aggressive punishment when you jeopardize the safety of a building. But the greater majority of incidents that happen do not jeopardize the majority of the building.
I think the greatest change was in me. I began to see the same behaviors over and over again. And when I realized it, I said, wait, I said, something else is wrong if Johnny can't stop fighting. So then I reached out to our clinicians, our social workers and our counselor and our case manager, and I said, look at this. I need you to look at the behaviors that I'm seeing. Find out the trigger. What's triggering him to that point? And then once we found that out and I began to really look at it, it was time to stop talking about the problem and making a solution.
What we want to teach our students is to kind of navigate through that conflict, take some accountability, ownership of that, of when you do harm, and really learn the skill of reflecting on it.
When we have the restorative conversations with the students, when we can talk one-on-one and share our feelings, like, this is how I feel right now, this is how you affected my teaching, this is how this impacted everybody else, how do you feel about this? Or what would you do if you were me?
And suddenly now they're confronting it in the moment, being present on what really happened, rather than making up excuses or rationalizing it away, blaming someone else for it. So we do a lot of peer-to-peer conversations and teaching them how to talk to each other, and then we also do conflict resolution, a lot of that. We've also established more of a culture of respect and a culture of positive interactions. We're really stressing positive relationships.
It's adults in this building that will give you a different point of view. Most of the time, it prevents things from happening.
When they start seeing other people, faculty and staff members, generally caring about them, not just, hey, how you doing, but actually, how are you?
Other faculty members here, they want us to graduate on time.
This year has been really, really good. The hallway's peaceful. You have students in class.
Grades went up, scores went up, NWA went up. We shown growth.
It's like everybody's trying to learn right now. Everybody's trying to pass and trying to learn something.
All the other teachers here, they are very supportive. They really want you to do the right thing when it comes to education, and they want you to have a really good life. They don't want you out in the street.
When I began to really assess the communities, where they're coming out of and what's going on with them at home, then we wanted this to be their safe haven.
If I need help on something, I can go to one of the teachers, the staff. They make you feel like you're a family to them. You mean something to them, you're very special.
We actually listen, we talk to, we mentor, we give and help develop skills to students that might not have necessarily had them. Some of the students look at us as fathers, mothers, mentors.
And that's the difference, the concern, the compassion, the love, and that's called real love that they're giving them.
And what I want to see is less students giving up and more students making the decision and the choice to be somebody positive in our community.
Makes my heart happy just hearing student voice. Thanks for asking about that, Tracy, in terms of this video. So again, I'd invite you to be an agent of positive change. The next group of slides and the video comes from the International Institute for Restorative Practices. These are training materials. Again, all these ideas that we're going to talk about are concepts that have been developed over time through experiences. Some of the concepts have been influenced and inspired by indigenous communities throughout the world. For example, the Restorative Conference was inspired by the Maui people of New Zealand. Much of the circle work comes from several indigenous communities throughout North America. The practice actually came before the theory. Restorative practices is the science of relationships and community, how we build and sustain relationships, as well as how we restore relationships when things go wrong. So again, the context of this work, IIRP, started when the founders, Susan and Ted Wachtel, both educators, were looking for more relational and participatory ways to work with at-risk youth. This material is trademarked, and it is intellectual property of the International Institute for Restorative Practices. This is a global community of practice. So here's our hypothesis. I know my psychs love that. So again, as we unpack restorative practices and explore the alignment with SWEBs, as a disclaimer, this brief introduction does not equip you with the tools and skills that you would need to implement restorative practices with fidelity. We'll share some opportunities for fall trainings. Corinne and I will share that at the end. So again, it is about relationships and community. We grow in the direction we most frequently ask questions about. So what do healthy and appropriate relationships look like, sound like, feel like? What barriers can get in the way of building those relationships and community, and how are those barriers overcome? This is the good work of restorative practices. So we're going to develop community, and we're going to be able to manage conflict and tensions by repairing harm and restoring relationships. Thanks, Corinne. So you may be thinking about your own restorative implicit practices like SEL, right? Social emotional learning. Anyone focusing on empathy these days with your students and yourself? So these are actually the explicit practices. We will dive deep into to each of these areas during the training. This is why restorative practices works. So the social discipline window, we already heard Kathleen speak to the with quadrant. We want to be doing things with people. We're going to take a deep dive into these explicit practices during the training. We want to be doing things with all stakeholders. We'll be doing activities. We are going to draw from our own experiences. Can you think about a time when someone in a position of authority treated you restoratively? What was that experience like for you? What was it specifically that made it restorative? Going to really do a lot of reflecting during the trainings. Again, another explicit practice is fair process. We'll talk about the 3 E's with fair process. We're just going to breeze through this. Again, the central idea of fair process: individuals are most likely to trust and cooperate freely with systems, whether they themselves win or lose by those systems, when fair process is observed. So we're going to take an even deeper dive into the psychology of affect. So this is the work of Sylvan Tompkins. And to me, as Corinne and I actually spent 2 weeks immersed in this in June, the end of June, to me, this is really why RP works, right? This is the comprehensive understanding of the biological and evolutionary roots of human motivation. Marcy, you are going to love this. I think I saw, did I see Ellie on here too? Was trying to see who my psychs were out there. So yeah, I'm just, yes, on fire with this good work. So this is John Braithwaite. He's actually a criminologist, an Australian. And to me, this is probably the most life-giving piece of this practice. So part of what Braithwaite did was and what we're looking at doing is separating the deed from the doer, right? The act, the unacceptable behavior, the behavioral error is to be rejected because, again, we didn't meet expectations. But we're still going to acknowledge the intrinsic worth of the person and how we can restore them. How we will make a choice to bring them back into the community. Would you want to be known for all of your worst mistakes, all of your missteps in your life? Whew, just gave me goosebumps. I don't want to be, my friends. So the restorative practices is on a continuum. So if you look at the proactive piece, So 80% is everything up to circles. The actual formal conferencing is only 20% of this work. And that also helps us measure the fidelity of implementation, because we want the formal conferencing to only be about 20% of our work. So in the next few slides, we're just going to kind of breeze through. There's affective statements. There's our affective questions. So as we're going through the training together, again, we will start to really take each of these explicit practices and review them. We'll develop the skills that you already have. You're already using affective statements. You're already using affective questions. So how do we be more intentional, more purposeful? So these are actually the restorative questions cards. So, and actually I have one right here. Can you see it? That's how little it is. So we would be handing them out. Everyone would have them. Again, we're looking at a common language. And these, what I find so interesting is what we know is real about this work is the students will start to ask these questions, right? Because through circles, again, there'll be conflict resolution. You'll be using these questions. So these are the restorative questions. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who's been affected by what you've done, and how were they affected? What did you think you need to do to make things right? Right? So it's this idea of restoration, right? If I make a mess, I used to tell my kids, we're gonna clean it up, right? What can we do to clean this up? How can we make this mess our message, right? What are we learning from that? So again, we're teaching empathy. So the small impromptu conversations, again, my guess is when you think about your practice now, you're having heaps of small impromptu conversations, but we're gonna be more intentional. So this is the responsiveness piece. So moving on to circles, thank you, Corinne. Corinne's gonna do a session. What time is that, Corinne, on circles?
That is during session 4, so 1:30 to 2:30.
Okay. So again, circles fosters community building, right? This is a tier 1 restorative practice, circles. So we can have circles for all kind of wonderful things, celebrations, information. This is an opportunity to do community building, experiential activities. We can circle out for conflict resolution. We can circle out for behavior, to check in about behavior. So it'd be a beautiful thing to do when Dr. Lane, when Kathleen spoke to being very explicit about what it is we want to see from children. We can do that circled up. We can speak to that in a circle. Obviously now with social distancing, we're gonna have to think about how it might look different. But again, this idea of community is a place in which students feel cared about and are encouraged to care about each other. They've come to think in the plural. They feel connected to each other. They're part of an us, right? Connected, that sense of belonging. Many of you know my acronym for CARE: consistent, accountable, respectful, enthusiastic. Nothing ever was accomplished without enthusiasm. So I love that quote. So many people, when they think about restorative practices, they go right to the restorative conferences. So this is a formal, scripted process, right? Structured meeting, the offender's there, the victim's there, both parties have family and friends, supporters, and they're going to deal with the consequences of a crime or wrongdoing and then decide how to repair the harm. So again, these are the scripted questions. And I did show you the little small card. And if we look at the restorative conferencing, so when we look at how does it fit into what's going on for you right now in your schools, so it can be used in response to truancy, to those disciplinary incidents, including violence, or as a prevention strategy. And that's kind of that circle work again. It doesn't mean that there might not be other consequences for a student, depending on what the offense was, or in terms of the harm that was caused. So there, again, there's a very formal process for this work. So there's actually a training for restorative practices, and then we're going to offer a training, a 2-day training just for restorative conferencing. So there is there is a blueprint about the fidelity of this good work. So what I love about this is it demonstrates how students can resolve their own problems when provided with this constructive forum to be able to do so, right? So again, this idea of building capacity in children, giving them the skills that they need to be able to right a wrong, to be able to be restored back into the community. So let's go to the next slide, Corinne. That's the, so here's the first opportunity. I shared, Corinne and I are actually the licensed IIRP trainers for Lincoln. And her and I were chatting a little bit. The dates are secure, but we don't really know if it's going to be in person or whether we'll be virtual yet. I think this is kind of a wait and see, but certainly, our contact information's there. If you have an interest and you want to reach out as we get a little closer, we'll have more information about that. But it is 2 full days. And this would be that restorative practices continuum from affective statements to the circles. We'll briefly look at the restorative conferencing, but the next slide shares. So here's actually the day 3 and day 4, facilitating the restorative conferences. So again, that takes 2 full-on days. I would also like to add that IIRP is going to offer another, after Corinne and I do the restorative practices and restorative conferences trainings, these 2 are a prerequisite for the TOT, the training of the trainer. So I would really encourage districts, and certainly if this good work is a passion for you, to reach out and say, I have a willingness to be a trainer. I would support, and Corinne, maybe you can speak to that as well, but I would really support systems having their own trainers. So guess what, my friends? This is so when we look at alignment, restorative practices, this will help increase the robust nature of your tier 1. This is a tier 1 intervention. So again, to be able to understand that this work has an accumulative impact, creates, again, what might be described as that restorative milieu. So again, culture, our culture is restorative, right? And the behavior, the climate, we're going to foster awareness, empathy, and responsibility in the way it'll prove to be far more effective in achieving the social discipline than our reliance on current punishment and sanctions, right? There's some real equity issues that we all know about when it comes to discipline and punishment. So I'm just going to look in the chat real quick there. Oh my goodness, I have a heart activity. So people are just looking for.
I'm just going to answer the question out loud.
Thank you.
Just
Correct.
because I don't type very fast. I am not great at that. Sorry. So just so people know, like Phyllis said, these trainings are what we refer to as gated trainings because you have to take one before the other. So if you're interested in the conferencing, you actually have to take the restorative practice and the circles at first. So all of it goes together because it is a continuum. So you'd have to do the restorative practice overview, then you'd have to do the circles, then you can do the 2-day conferencing. Unfortunately, IIRP does not break that up. I mean, it's not broken up for anyone because you have to have the solid understanding of why restorative practices came or how they came about and why they're used before you get the scripted piece of it. So I hope that makes sense. But if you go to the session matrix that you logged on to get all the Zoom information, the slide decks for all of our presentations are loaded in there and they're hyperlinked. So all you need to do is just click on Phyllis's slide deck and you'll see the flyers that we just put up. If you do want to sign up for one of the or all of the trainings. And you wouldn't have to, you wouldn't have to do them like in September and then in October, like if that didn't work for you, but you do have to do day 1 and 2 before you do day 3 and 4. So sorry about that.
Thank you, Corinne. I appreciate the clarity for sure. And there is so some of these slides I used were actually when I shared with, so any kind of training Corinne and I do, we need to connect with IIRP. So I actually had to ask permission from them to sort of break up the slide deck a little bit. I told them what we were doing here together for this hour. So they didn't want me to make up my own slides. They wanted me to use theirs. So there is a real fidelity and licensure piece to all of this that they're trademarked. This is all their intellectual property. So we definitely want to, all of us definitely want to do the right thing for sure. So speaking of servant hearts, all 22 of us. So can I see your heart? Can you make a heart for me? Nice. So this work is all about servant heart. I want you to take your heart, your hands, you've made your heart shape, take that heart and put it on your cheek. Oh, look at you guys. So how many people put it on their chin, watched me, rather than put it on their cheek? Most everyone will follow what you do rather than what you say. We had a few really high achievers in our group. So, so when you think about this idea of this tier 1 intervention, it's what everyone is doing and saying, right? For all stakeholders. We're talking the talk and we're walking the talk, right? People are watching us and we have to be the change that we want to see for sure. So thank you for engaging in the heart activity. We'll move on to the next slide. I think it's just asking, do you have any questions, comments? Anything, any kind of implementation inquiry that you might have? So let me just check the time. So it's about 10 out or so, and certainly some of you I think are probably going to go to lunch for sure. So I'm not seeing questions come up. How about takeaways? How do you see this working in your system? What are some takeaways for you?
I think when you start talking, this is Tracy, that when you start talking about like this restorative practice and relationships and stuff, and even some of the visuals used at the beginning, it kind of goes back to that whole child thing from so long ago, that it's not just, you know, who you see sitting at the desk or whatever. You have to start thinking about their culture, what they have going on at home, the whole emotion, the whole behavior and everything. So I think, you know, that whole relationship piece is so key, because you have to look at that whole child and restoring them and looking at the broken pieces.
Whew. Firecracker that, Miss Tracy. Thank you very much. Absolutely. It's all about relationships. And really, again, I started my teaching career in the late 70s. So I feel like the pendulum is like when you talk holistic child, I feel like the pendulum is really going back to doing what it is we know works. Especially in where we are with COVID, we must be hyper vigilant to relationships right now.
So I just want to address a comment that was in the chat, which was any suggestions for encouraging system change to discontinue the practice of out of school suspension.
Yes.
So first off, anybody that's ever been to any of my sessions here, if you were or not, you might know, but I taught in Baltimore for 15 years before coming to the IU. My last 2 years were at an alternative school where we actually used restorative practices. There are times where you still have to use out of school suspension. Obviously, if it is like a category 3 offense where they brought a weapon or drugs or things like that, OSS still would occur. The good work of restorative practices comes in when the student returns to the building after the out of school suspension. And then there is this restorative conference that's held between the student, you know, if it was a drug offense, then generally there would be some admin there, maybe some teachers. If it was an incident where children were fighting, the other child would be there. And then, like Phyllis said, you have supporters there in both sides. So sometimes these groups can get fairly large when you're talking about, you know, something that might have occurred that had a couple different victims, offenders, etc. But we want to realize that the whole point of the restorative conference is how you're going to reintegrate the student back into the community, and trying to really make sure that they understand that their actions had consequences, not just for themselves, but it affected other people. And that's where that community and that relationship building is really important, because once you see that students are understanding, oh, well, bringing weed to school, I didn't think that was a big deal. It's just me getting high. Well, you know, but it was a disruption to your class. You know, you might have had classmates that, you know, were harmed in the incident. So it's not a substitute for out of school suspension, because like I said, there are times where OSS has to happen. However, if the proactive piece of circles and that community building is done properly, that proactive jolt can really stop a lot of the problem behaviors that you might be having in your school. Just through talking about things, circling up and just getting things off your chest sometimes for these students is so important. And that can really reduce the rate of in-school suspensions. And it gives people the kind of like the way to just kind of get things off their chest and to talk about it. So if you really do want to enact this systematic change, I would suggest having a conversation with your admin and having them reach out to Dr. McCusker, and we would be more than willing to come and talk to the school and figure out maybe how we can give the presentation and then see where you want to go with that.
Thanks, Corinne. Yeah. Again, this is about building capacity in littles, right? Sometimes they don't have the language. This is developing that common language, those questions that we're going to be asking, those restorative questions. So again, instead of stigmatizing shame, we're looking at restoration, right? Again, would you want to be known for the worst thing you've ever done? What does it look like to invite them back into the community? Thanks, Corinne. How about,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to make sure that we've answered all the questions people have.
There is a great example of this that was done by the city of Cambridge just recently. They had a gentleman, they have a large Black Lives Matter mural, and a gentleman was convinced to lay rubber across the mural and do a basically peel out across the whole mural. And instead of throwing him in jail or doing anything else, they ended up bringing in, the community got together and they had a discussion with him about the importance of it and how it hurts the community. And then that afternoon, he and the rest of the community went and restored the mural. So instead of doing something that could be through the judicial branch, they ended up just handling it in an educational way. I recently saw that on one of the newspapers down there, and it was an amazing story where it brought the community together and his family together with these other groups to hear about and talk about the harm that what he did caused, but also he had to have a role in fixing it and working with the artist to fix it.
Wow. Thanks so much, Matt. Yes, it's that compassion that Kathleen spoke to as well. So I did see there was something in the chat about the responsive classroom and Sanford Harmony in Dover.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just answered her.
Oh, did you? Good,
Sorry.
thank you. All right, brilliant. I just wanted to make sure.
So everybody knows, just to, I'm actually trained in both. I was trained in responsive classroom years and years ago. And now Phyllis and I did the restorative justice. They are different. I know there are components of responsive classroom that do kind of line up with the tenets of restorative justice. But restorative justice is more scripted. And it's a proactive and a really more robust look at how you can systematically change the community of your school building. So they do a lot of the same things in responsive classroom where you're building that relationship and all of that, but there are pieces of restorative justice like the circles and how they work. They're sequential, non-sequential, yada yada. Like I said, I'm doing one later today if you want to come and see the circles one. it is just a little bit more of a scripted program than Responsive Classroom.
It does align beautifully with PBIS. I think that's the other piece of this when we look at the multi-tiered systems of support. This aligns beautifully with your PBIS processes. So thanks, Corinne. Thank you so much for the questions too, and your full participation here this morning. It was good for me to see some of you, so I appreciate, just miss being in a room with everyone. And so I just so appreciate those who made a choice to keep the video on there today. Yes, so again, I want to thank you for your time and attention this morning, and just invite you to stay in faith, stay safe, and be well, my friends. Grace, mercy, peace, and love.
Thanks, Phyllis.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. Please feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions, or if you're interested in knowing a little bit more for your district.
And Corinne, will you just go to the next slide real quick? So again, just be sure, like, here's your evaluation questions, and then you can go back through that link, right, Corinne? They can go back to the matrix for if anyone has a new, right? Oh, there we go. Oh, just when I can't love you anymore, girl. Thank you so much. Be well, friends. Peace and love. Thank you very much. Oh, there's my friend Steph. Thank you, Corinne. You're the best. Great job.